Can you hear me? Okay. Can everybody hear me? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Thank you. You did a very good job of settling down. So welcome, and thank you for coming this morning to the University Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. A couple of housekeeping items. Reminder, in case you didn't know, that flu and cold season is here. So it's complicated this year with another new strain of COVID. Not as deadly, but still quite serious and easily spread. So please, if you're feeling sick, we urge you to stay home. We have a Zoom or YouTube where you can watch online and connect with our other people that are online this morning. And you will find the link each week in our notable news. So if you have not signed up for our notable news, I know there are little forms in the lobby or maybe on the side table where we can make sure we've got your email so you can keep up with what's happening. Also, if you need to exit quickly, a reminder, this back sliding glass doors are open closest to the kitchen, and there's an exit outside. We also have one straight down the hallway or right out the front door. So just know where your exits are, just like you're in a movie theater. And make sure you turn off your cell phones and get ready to settle in our shared sacred space. Seems like there was one more thing. We just had a service leader meeting this morning and went over some new things, and that's the only two I can think of. So I'm sure that we are ready to go now. So our first order of business is our committee moments. I believe we have a slide that will show you some of the highlights coming up this week. Pride, next Saturday. How many of you are signed up for our Pride Parade? Either to help decorate the float, walk in the parade, be at our booth, and share the wonderful news about our fellowship with anybody who stops by? It's not too late. It's not too late. See Kelly? Kelly's here. Oh, she's got her t-shirt. You want to come up and show everybody what they should be wearing? Just because this is a big event. You know, we're trying to shorten the time we spend on announcements, but yet this is a big deal, the Pride Parade.
Good morning, Kelly Buchanan, I'm part of the marketing committee. Again, as Martha mentioned, Saturday. Thank you, Paula. As Martha mentioned, this Saturday is Pride Parade, and we have about 30 individuals that have registered, so it's a great turnout. Nice job. We will be partnering with our sister church downtown, and we'll be walking together during the parade. If you are attending the Pride and do not have a t-shirt, please let me know. We have a few of these extra left over. So we do have these t-shirts for you if you need a t-shirt to walk in the parade or just to participate, whether it's in the booth or to help decorate. So let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Every year we get more and more people, and it's just a wonderful thing to march in that parade, especially with all our other Unitarian members, and support our community. So what else is there? We got Market Day. That'll be coming up again. Is it really October 25th?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll save that for joys and concerns. But anyway, check with Kelly about that too. Work Day's coming up, trunk or treat. Anyway, so let's see, we've got a few that didn't make the slide, so come on up, Lorraine. Huh? You can say something, Derek, of course.
I'm Lorraine Williams, representing the Pastoral Care Committee. Excuse me.
Yes.
We have had an outreach from a person who was not a member here but used to attend here for a period of time several years ago. She is in need of help. She is wanting to rent a room. If you want more information on the situation, if you're in a position to help, or if you know of somebody who might be willing to get involved with this, please come and see me and Martha after the service, and we can fill you in on what's going on and how you might be able to help. Thank you.
She has a room to rent?
No, she
needs a room.
She fears she is losing her house at the end of this month and needs help.
All right. Here is our new illustrious Workday coordinator.
Yes, great. Hey, guys, facilities and grounds, Derek. There's a workday, right?
Yes, next.
Do we
next-
remember?
Yes.
Can I get I'm going to buy some, like, plants and we're going to do some really cool landscaping, like maybe a little mini Japanese garden in the Memorial Garden, right? So can I just, look, you don't have to swear on the Bible or whatever that you'll be here.
Pick a
But can I just
tone,
get
yeah.
a rough order of magnitude, show of hands, of who might be here?
On my first board job.
Okay, so I could maybe have like 2 crews, maybe.
Yeah.
So we could do 2 little things. Super, thanks, you guys.
Thank you for your enthusiasm, Derek. We'll get there. And
Hi, Chloe Hatfield on behalf of Women's Group. We will be meeting the first Friday, that would be November 3rd, and we are going to be having a potluck since it's going to be in November. So we hope to see you there.
And all of these updates, what's coming up in the next week, the month, they're all in our newsletter. So if you're not signed up, please get that. It comes out every Thursday evening, and then you can make your plans and keep us on your calendar, see what's happening. Okay. Oh, and we also have a program planning meeting. We didn't put it up here. I don't know why, because, anyway, Tuesday, if any of you would like to participate and help us plan our programs for the next quarter, come on out Tuesday night. We're doing it in person at 7 o'clock. We'll be here, and you can email me or Janet, Martha or Janet. Okay, so let's get started then. Good morning once again. I'm Martha Kirby. My pronouns are she or her, or you can ask me and we'll have a discussion about why we do that, because I think it's important. So I'm glad you've all chosen to be here with us this morning. My opening words, it's been a rough week. I'm sure all of us have been sadly watching what's happening in Israel and Palestine and all over the world, but this is particularly horrendous now. So I wanted to just read this statement from our UUA president, Dr. Sophia Betancourt, about the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Beloveds, I invite you to stop what you are doing, if you can, and sit with me in the depth of this tragedy. How to reconcile the cost of occupation and of war. How to nuance 2 very real histories of oppression and violence. I'm holding close the words of UN Middle East Peace Envoy Tor Wennesland, who said, "This is a dangerous precipice, and I appeal to all to pull back from the brink." We, as a people of faith, can condemn violence against civilians while at the same time engaging the full legacies and histories of oppression that shape such devastating conflict. As a faith tradition, Unitarian Universalists have long worked for peace, and our principles and values call for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. At the same time, we have not engaged the tangled issues surrounding Israel, Palestine, and community since 2018, and our last engagement resulted in severed relationships and deep pain. I pray for the people of Israel and Palestine. I pray for leaders around the globe who must respond to this latest flare of violence and the untenable ethical considerations that abound. I pray for Muslim and Jewish UUs who experience the impact of this long strife acutely. I pray that those of us less likely to know the trauma of unending brutality and harm will not turn away from generational loss, from the devastating realities and their root causes, or from the relentless tragedy of war and occupation. Be gentle with yourselves when you need to be, but do not turn away unless you must. We are one global family, living tenuously on the same human-impacted earth. Let us center ourselves in justice as we call for peace. Okay. Let's move on to our opening music. We will be inspired today by Inclusion, If I Only Had a Brain. All right.
could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. In my head, I'd be scratching all my thoughts, I'd be hatching if I only had a brain. I'd unravel every riddle for any individual in trouble or in pain. With the thoughts I'd be thinking, I could be another Lincoln if I only had a brain. Oh, I could tell you why the ocean meets the shore. I could think of things I never thought before, and then I'd sit and think some more. I would not be just a nothing, my head all full of stuffing, my heart all full of pain. I would dance and be merry, I would be a ding-dang if I only had a brain. If I only had a brain.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Thank you. Our chalice lighter this morning is Chase. Chase is 13. He uses pronouns he and him, and he is very happy that he drew swords today. Swords today? Is that with a pencil? Ah. Very good. Please join me in the words on the screen. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, seek to sustain and to share, and our affirmation of how we intend to live our lives together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and love, and to help one another. So welcome again this morning. I see a few familiar faces and a few unfamiliar faces, which is always wonderful. We invite you, if you're a guest this morning for the first time or even the 15th, to continue to come share community with us until you feel ready to join. And it takes a little while to get a flavor of everything that we have to offer. So why don't you take a moment and see if you can greet somebody near to you that you don't know already. Or maybe you don't know well. You've only got a minute. Okay. Now that you've had just a taste of how much fun that can be, you'll be ready to stay after for coffee and tea and more conversation. And now it's time to return back to our service. Chop, chop. Joys and concerns are a very special part of this congregation's tradition. Because we are a faith community, and we love each other, and we want to help. We love celebrating joys and knowing how we can help you address your concerns. So please take a moment to come forward to the mic. If you'd rather share from your seat, wave at me, and I will bring it to you. And we'll move a stone for each joy or concern as a good memory.
Thank you, Martha. Margie here. I've had a wonderful week. I wasn't here last weekend because it had started before then, but I've been inundated by visitors, a bunch of girlfriends that I invited from. One came in from Frankfurt, and I brought 3 with me, 2 friends we've been friends for 30 years. They're from St. Louis, and then my niece from North Carolina. So it has been, but today they're leaving. But it's been a fabulous visit. Lots of eating and drinking and lots of fun. So thank you, girls.
I have 2 joys. One, this morning we got donuts, and for some reason, the place that we got donuts at had teddy bears that were bigger than me. And also, I got almost everything for my Halloween costume this year.
And this is Peter. I am very fond of meditating, and I'm about to go on my second of 4 planned meditation retreats next Sunday. This time next Sunday, I'll be heading north on the interstate to Georgia for a 10-day meditation retreat, and I'll tell you all about it when I get back.
Enjoy.
Hi, Chloe Hatfield, and I know a lot of you are probably sick and tired of me talking about a petrified forest, but yesterday we had our Children's Day, and why we have our Children's Day is not only to make a comfortable and more inviting place for kids to come and enjoy the forest, but also to raise money for Make-A-Wish, and we raised over $3,200, and it was so fun being a part of that. I know I've been there for 8 years, but it was my first time volunteering for that, and it was so much fun, and I can't wait to do it again next week. Or next year. I want to do it next week. That'd be great, but yeah, that's my joy.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I have a couple joys and a concern. My concern is I had to have a little something zapped on me, it's okay, it's not too bad, but I just wanted to remind everybody to wear your sunblock when you're out and about. And then my joy is last week I was able to volunteer at a pregnancy conference where we had it was an expo for pregnant women and their families to come, and I ran a booth on safe sleep for newborns, and we had over 1,200 people come to our booth, and just spreading that knowledge of safe sleep out there was wonderful. It was sad I missed coming here, but it felt very good to be there. And then my other joy is I have my mother, Susie, visiting from West Virginia, seeing her great-granddaughter for the first time. 4 generations in one house. It's been really lovely.
Wow, that's wonderful. Joey Cole, I have 2 joys and a concern. My concern is that I've been reaching out to my Jewish granddaughters, and they are obviously reacting to what's going on, but they are getting some good support in their colleges. And one of my joys is that my oldest had an internship with one of the local papers. She wants to be a journalist, and she's a senior. And one of her articles that she did as an intern was published. So we're very excited about that. Yeah, the writing runs in the family, I think. Her dad, I remember, wrote a whole novel about animals when he was about 8. So, at any rate, the other joy I have is that my husband finally got his hernia operation on Tuesday, and things went better than expected. So, thank you.
I went to the zoo today, and I wear my costume. Monkeys. I am 5 and all in kindergarten, and you know it. Well, Ethan's in charge of me. I hope you know it again. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Jules, and I missed last week because I was able to celebrate my 19th birthday, which was very fun. Also, the week before, I got a very large tattoo, and it's finally healed really nicely, so I'm very happy.
Good morning, Michelle Flores. I have a couple of joys, but the biggest one is that my son recently got a job in his chosen field and is very happy where he's at and like is on his way to a profession and a career. It's very exciting for me as a parent. He's my oldest at 22 and I'm like, woo, you're doing it. And he followed that up with, like, it's been a couple of weeks now, he's had this job and he invited me out to lunch, his treat. And I was like, oh, okay.
Good morning, Andrew Weibel. I have two joys. First one is, so I'm a tax accountant and the extended tax deadline ends tomorrow, so I gotta stop working 70-hour weeks, so looking forward to that, looking forward to some sleep. Second one is my brother is getting married this next weekend and I gotta go fly out to Texas and be the best man, and Addie gets to be the flower girl, so we're looking forward to that.
Good morning, everyone. Miguel Rodriguez here. I have a concern, and I think most of us do. It's regarding what happened this week, this past week, horrible events, but I am not talking particularly about the attack on Israel by Hamas. I'm talking about the reaction on the left, on the far left. It was appalling and disgusting. I was not surprised, though, because I saw it coming for many years. Our intolerance, the far, far left's intolerance toward, like, white men over 50. Not all white men over 50 are bad people. The ageism that we see a lot of times. Yes, we have to take a deep look inside ourselves, before we judge others. I also found myself reacting to the events that happened this week, and I called all my Jewish friends that I know, gave them my condolences, told them I'd be praying for their families if they're in Israel, and I forgot my Palestinian friends. And then I try to reach out to them. Sometimes we react and we don't take time to step back and think. So again, we sometimes, we're so angry at pedophiles, right? We just want to kill pedophiles. They're so disgusting and everything. But then the events that took place in Israel, when we heard the deaths of babies in their cribs and stuff, and some people on the far left were celebrating these acts of violence by Hamas. It wasn't all of Islam, and it wasn't the majority of Palestinians. It was an act by a certain group. So again, we need to reflect on these things.
It's complicated, yeah.
And it is very so. Just some words, I think, to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. And I'm going to end on a final joy. I will not be here next week because I will be in England, hopefully attending the Unity Unitarian somewhere there. I found it. Anyway, we're going to try to do that Sunday, but I will be visiting my daughter for a week. So I'm very excited. She's teaching there for a year. And I will be back Friday night at 8 o'clock, and provided I don't have any jet lag, I will be at workday the next day. So just so you know, Derek, that's my intention. We'll see how it goes. So let's just take a moment to hold, especially, every week it seems like we could ponder the current conflict and how we can make a difference. But just hold everyone in your hearts for a moment and all the joys and concerns that remain unspoken. Thank you. Time for all ages today. I did not check. I know James is not here, so we may not have a time for all ages. Oh, Roberta does. Good. I was a little late to the pulpit this morning. So, Roberta, welcome.
Hi, everybody. A while ago, can you all hear me? A while ago, I shared my story of the butterfly fairies with you. And today, I'm going to do a sequel. But before I start, I thought maybe I should do a quick review so that you would understand the sequel. The butterfly fairies use their big, beautiful, powerful wings, flapping them very hard, to keep away predators from the butterfly eggs, caterpillars, and the butterflies themselves. Well, it turns out that a butterfly fairy was born and who became known as meadowgrass without any wings. And she could not survive in the meadow because she couldn't protect the life cycle of the butterflies, and she was very unhappy. And her mother said, you know, there's a place for everybody in the world, and the meadow is not your place. We'll miss you, we love you, but all we want is your happiness. You must leave the meadow and find your place in the world. And she does. After traveling around in the forest for 3 days, she met up with a rare group of fairies that were wingless, that took care of the flowers in the forest. They welcomed her, and she joined them as their family. And so that story had a happy ending. Now, the next story is called The Magic Bubble Pipe. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the flower fairies were having fun playing their favorite game, tag with the butterflies, except for Meadowgrass. She was sitting by the oak tree with sort of a long, distant, almost sad look in her eyes. Rose came over to her. Are you all right? Oh, she said, you know how happy I am that you welcomed me and made me part of your family. But seeing all these butterflies, I miss my mother. I miss the other butterfly fairies. I miss the meadow. Well, said Daffodil, why don't you go back and visit them? And Tiger Lily said, and if you want any company, I'll come with you. And the other flower fairy said, we can all go. We would love to meet the butterfly fairies. That is if you want company. Oh, said Meadowgrass, I would love that. And so they packed up some food the very next day because Meadowgrass said it would take about 3 days walking along the river to reach the meadow. And they'd be camping out and picnicking. And so they threw their bedrolls over their shoulders and grabbed some food and began to walk along the river. For the first 2 days, they were having a lot of fun. They'd walk, they'd stop and take breaks and play hide and seek in the woods. The Sun King was hot, and sometimes they'd splash in the river to cool off. And Meadowgrass was thinking, oh, this is so wonderful. I could never play hide and seek with the butterfly fairies because they played up in the tall branches of the trees, and I couldn't get up there to play with them. And they would never go in the river to get wet. They'd have to stay in the sun and dry off their wings. But now it was the 3rd day, and the fairies were in good spirits because Meadowgrass said we should reach the meadow today. But as they walked along that morning, they saw something up ahead of them. It was a cloud, but it was a cloud on the ground right by the riverbank. What is that, said Meadowgrass. Oh, that's Foggy Philomena's doing. She's a witch, and she's a mean witch. She doesn't like anybody, and nobody likes her. So she has this magic bubble pipe, and she can blow a mist out of it, and she can blow enough to make a big cloud around her, to remind everybody to stay away from her wherever she happens to be. Some of the other forest creatures have gone into her cloud, and they could hear her say, he who comes into my space, may warts grow all over your face. So stay away, you foolish ones, or you may never again see the sun. Oh, said Meadowgrass, I guess we're going to walk all the way around her cloud. Tiger Lily said, I'm not afraid of her. I'm going to walk right through it. Well, the other fairies decided if Tiger Lily could walk through the cloud, so could they. And they stepped into the cloud. When they put their hand up in front of their face, the cloud was so thick they couldn't even see it. but they continued to walk. And all of a sudden, Violet tripped on something. And that something said, "Ouch!" She looked down, and there was Philomena laying flat on her face with her foot caught in a root. "What are you annoying fairies doing in my space?" We're on the way to the meadow to visit the butterfly fairies. Well, I tripped on this root and fell, and my foot got caught in it, and I can't get out. "Oh, maybe we can help," said the fairies. "Oh, you fairies can barely move a blade of grass. You can't do this by yourself." Well, the fairies knew she was right, but who would help? Most of the animals or creatures were afraid of her, and the others would probably say, "She's so mean, why should I help her?" But Camellia said, "You know, I saw Molly Mole just outside the cloud. Maybe she can help, because moles like to dig tunnels underground, and she could dig a tunnel to the root and loosen up the soil." So they asked Molly Mole if she could help, and she said yes. Her and her family loved digging tunnels, and they dug a tunnel underground and was loosening the root, and the fairies were doing it on top of the ground. And eventually, Philomena was able to pull her foot out and stand up. Well, I guess if you fairies hadn't come by, I'd still be caught under that root. But you know something, you won't get to the meadow in time today because you stopped to help me, unless. And then she did something. She had another power. She could call the wind up to do her bidding. She asked the wind to blow away the cloud, and it did. And then she told all the fairies to stand close together, and they did. And she took out her magic bubble pipe, but instead of blowing mist, she blew a big bubble around them. And then she said to the wind, "Carry this bubble to the meadow." And the next thing the fairies knew is that they were floating above the trees going down the river toward the meadow. And Meadowgrass was looking out. And then soon she said, "There's the meadow. There's the butterfly fairies." Now the butterfly fairies looked up. They'd never seen a big bubble coming down in the middle of their meadow, and they started to fly around, go up and fly around the bubble to see what it was. And Isabel, Meadowgrass's mother, was there, and she says, it's Meadowgrass, she's come home to us." The bubble came down, popped on the ground, and Meadowgrass and her mother just ran to each other and hugged. They were so happy to see each other. But Meadowgrass had a lot to explain. She left alone and came back in a bubble with 5 other wingless fairies. And of course they did. They stayed for 3 days, and they all had fun and got to know each other. But then the flower fairy said, "It's time for us to go home." And the butterfly fairy said, "Well, now that we know where Meadowgrass is and where you live, we'll come down and visit you soon." And so the flower fairies walked along the river for 3 days, went deep into the forest to their home beneath the roots of the oak tree, and looked forward to the visit of the butterfly fairies. Thank you.
That was fun. Made me think of the Wizard of Oz with the big bubble that comes in, and Glenda, you know. I love that. Our interlude and offering today, we will be listening to One More Step with our inclusion. I think we're going to sing maybe 2, and Paula is taking Michael's place today. As you contemplate how much you're able to put in the basket, know that 40% will be going to Floridians Protecting Freedom, who are working for reproductive rights now with getting a new amendment on the ballot this year, or next year, actually. So, Paula?
We're going to stay seated because it's too hard to pass baskets and be standing up at the same time. It gets too weird. So, one more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone. we'll take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more song, we will sing one more song, till every song is sung for everyone. We'll sing one more song.
Thank you, Sarah and Paula. And let's sing one more song, our children's processional. We love you and bless you and send you on your way. We love you and bless you today and every day. Yay. So it's my pleasure to introduce a returning speaker. It's been, I think, almost 4 years, at least. I can't remember if it was 2018 or 19. You know, then we had that COVID thing that went on forever. So we're welcoming back today Dr. Jeffrey Nall. He's an adjunct instructor in women, gender, and sexuality studies at Florida Atlantic University. He also teaches courses in humanities and philosophy for UCF. He publishes Humanities in Revolt, a Substack newsletter devoted to exploring the relevance of the humanities to everyday life. So we welcome him to tell us about buzzwords and critical thinking.
The concept of critical thinking is birthed by the insight that living well, being a good person, being happy, and living to our fullest potential requires good thinking. What's more, good thinking is an art that requires study, practice, and conscious effort to master. And just as we should not expect to naturally develop the ability to be a pilot or a surgeon without actively developing these skills, we should not expect to master the art of thinking well without concentrated dedication and effort. And the problem, of course, is that thinking is natural to us in a way that flying a plane and conducting surgery or something like playing an instrument isn't. So it seems strange to even suggest that thinking is an art or a skill at all. And the confusion is this: anyone can think, just as anyone can press buttons in a cockpit of an airplane, wield a scalpel, or cacophonously drag a bow across the strings of a violin. But it takes skill, it takes practice to think well, just as it takes skill and practice to competently fly the plane, to ensure that the scalpel helps rather than harms the patient, or to elicit harmony from the strings of that violin. I've been privileged to be a college professor since 2010, and through this deeply satisfying, though poorly compensated work, since I've been in adjunct most of the time, but I'm not complaining. I've taught about 200 classes in philosophy, humanities, women and gender studies. I've taught classes ranging from Introduction to Ethics and Intro to Philosophy, Encountering the Humanities here at UCF, and courses like Men and Masculinities at Florida Atlantic University. But one of my favorite classes to teach, a class that was probably the most intimidating to teach at first, has been critical thinking. And today I share with you some of what I have learned over the past 13 years of dedicated study, practice, and teaching about the art of critical thinking. And I just want to be very clear that I am not standing before you claiming to be a master of this art. Rather, what I claim is to be a dedicated student, striving for excellence, who hopes that he has some interesting, perhaps insightful, helpful things to share with you about critical thinking. So critical thinking is not just thinking hard, and it's certainly not just thinking a lot. You can be an overthinker and not be a critical thinker. To be a critical thinker is not the same also as being smart or having an advanced degree. Critical thinking is no more specific to being a doctor than it is to being a mechanic or a parent for that matter. And critical thinking is as important to loving others and being a good person and experiencing happiness as it is to getting and keeping and performing well at a job. To sum up what I'll spend the rest of my time describing in greater detail, to think critically is to take responsibility for our thinking and therefore life by determining what is true and what ought to be done through concentrated reflection, research, and reasoning. More specifically, reflection and reasoning guided by, yes, logic, but also creativity, compassion, humility, honesty, open-mindedness, fair-mindedness, and something I'll focus on today, courage. There is no critical thinker without courage. Thinking is something that, on the one hand, we do all the time. To think, to navigate, or make sense of, or organize experience and ideas is essential to being human. Thinking is so ordinary that, ironically, we often don't even think about our thinking, as if that's an absurdity. Now, anyone who's ever gotten in a car to drive somewhere, only to become entirely absorbed in music, an audiobook, maybe some makeup you probably shouldn't be applying, maybe some food you probably shouldn't be eating, maybe a phone call, maybe just lost in your own thoughts, may recall that strange feeling of arriving to your destination and wondering to yourself, how the hell did I get here? When did that happen? I don't remember. It's almost as if we had forgotten we were operating a motor vehicle which had just a few minutes ago been traveling at speeds surpassing 45 miles an hour, because frankly, who's got the time to drive that kind of speed? You know, they got someplace to be. And in densely trafficked streets. Now, we were undoubtedly thinking as we were shifting those gears using turn signal, well, at least some of us, turning the wheel to maneuver around a corner, alternating between accelerating and stepping on the brake. The point is that thinking is so natural to our lives that one of the challenges we face as human beings is to develop mindfulness, that basic self-awareness of the very thinking that quite literally drives us through our lives. Too often we falsely believe we are simply experiencing the world as it is, through the naked eye, without adulteration, without influence, without ideology. And here we discover one of the most significant obstacles to critical thinking, our tendency to be oblivious to the multiplicity of divergent thought, belief, and experience outside of our minds, such that we take our own views as self-evidently true. One of the most important steps in pursuing the art of thinking well is becoming mindful that your beliefs are the result of an often unrecognized interpretive process of reasoning or making inferences. Now, this is not exactly the most exciting part of my talk, but if you just hang with me, it's probably the most important part. The importance of mindful thinking can't be overstated once you grasp the significance of the fact that most of what we claim to know about the world is a result not of direct experience or mere observation, but of a perpetual process of interpretation through inference or reasoning. To infer or to reason is to come to a conclusion about something. I'm going to like that movie, for example, on the basis of something else we think is true. I like movies with Tom Cruise. That movie has Tom Cruise in it. Now, while most of us are familiar with the dictionary definition of words like inference and reasoning, we tend to confuse knowing how to generally use a word or to know its definition with knowing its fundamental meaning and its deeper implications, the meaning behind the word, the sound, the letters. Very few things in life can be understood without making an inference, without interpretation. I'm not just speaking about a poem or a movie or a creative work. I'm talking about everyday interactions and facts of the world. And when we consider how often we draw conclusions on a daily basis and how many times we do this on the basis of inferences, those interpretations, they form the basis of our subsequent inferences. We build one inference and then we build upon that inference. And if we've built upon a false understanding at the beginning, we've built on a weak and fragile structure. And if we recognize this, we're in a position to appreciate how important it is for us to develop mindfulness about our thinking process, which in turn shapes our choices which shape our actions and therefore shape our lives. I began my critical thinking courses by trying to help students appreciate the significance that human beings can make sense out of the world, not merely by observing that, for example, this four-legged furry creature barking and wagging its tail is a dog, but that the conclusion, this is a dog, is the result of an inference, of an interpretation, of our having filtered our observation of a four-legged furry creature barking and wagging its tail through a concept that most of the time comes to us from culture that we didn't author, that we didn't come up with, but that was taught to us at an early age, before we had a seat at the table to evaluate those concepts. We merely adopt them because we'd like to be able to communicate and make sense of the world. The problem we face is that we believe our perception of and thinking about the world is unfiltered, and that we simply see the world as it is. And we're frustrated that all of these other people, these damn fools, can't see what we see. We wonder if they've got 20/20 vision. Why can't they just see the world like we do? Imagining the following. You're telling a friend about a recent argument you've just had with your spouse, but your friend keeps checking her watch, and you conclude that they clearly don't care about your feelings or your difficulties. Here you are pouring out your heart, and they keep checking the clock. So you, rational person that you are, you cut the conversation off and you abruptly leave. A reaction like this, ideally it would sound too ridiculous to even be able to relate to, but alas, we're humans. And the fact that we have the capacity for reason does not mean that we reason often. But here's the thing, it feels that way. It feels disrespectful in that situation. Later when your friend calls asking, what the heck happened? You just sort of stormed off and left. You indignantly respond, condemning their disrespectful. You're so insensitive. What do you mean? Why did I do that? How could you behave that? How could you be so callous? And the situation just would spiral on from there, as your friend angrily defends herself against what she perceives as an unprovoked, irrational attack. We too often, infrequently, appreciate that the facts of the world do not by themselves disclose their meaning or significance. To determine something's significance or meaning, we filter it. We filter it through one or more interpretive lenses or beliefs. The fact our friend is checking the time, it might indicate impatience. It might indicate disinterest. It might indicate that you need, better, decisions making about friends. But it might actually, conversely, mean that they have some place to be and that they cannot be late. The fact that your friend sits there with you and listens, checking the time periodically, might indicate that they've chosen to prioritize being in your company, being compassionate until the very last minute when they know that they have to leave and they can't wait an extra second. It could indicate patience instead of the impatience that you presumed. And the point is this, the fact that someone looks at the time tells us nothing other than someone is looking at the time. Only when such a fact is coupled with an interpretive belief, such as if they check the time frequently, they don't actually care about what I have to say, does it actually gain meaning or significance. And yet these kinds of background beliefs often go unrecognized. We take them for granted as givens, assuming that everyone is reading from the same script as we are, seeing through the same lenses. And often enough, there are enough people looking at it like we do, that we are given the impression that there's nothing to see there, that everybody who has reason and 20/20 vision is going to see it the same way we do. Quite often enough, They aren't facts at all that are influencing the most important decisions and conclusions we come to. They're value judgments, actually. That is to say, there are statements about what's good and bad, appropriate or inappropriate, worth doing or worth less. For all of our understandable concern about the facts, especially in a world where people want to dismiss empirical reality, it's important for us not to fail to recognize that facts by themselves are mostly meaningless by definition. They don't tell us what to do about them. As the pioneering social theorist Erich Fromm explained in his pioneering work 1941, Escape from Freedom, the belief that accumulated information, says a lot about what's wrong with part of our education system, the fact that the belief that accumulating information was the same as developing knowledge, he said, this is a superstition. And I quote, "The pathetic superstition prevails that by knowing more and more facts, one arrives at knowledge of reality. To be sure, thinking without knowledge of facts remains empty and fictitious, but information alone can be just as much an obstacle to thinking as the lack of it." End quote. Lots of information does not generate wisdom or understanding necessarily. The English philosopher John Stuart Mill made much the same point, actually, in his classic work on liberty when he wrote, quote, "Very few facts are able to tell their own story without comments to bring out their meaning," end quote. Facts distilled from vital context. This is what our news does to us all the time. Facts distilled of vital context, of elaboration, of insightful reasoned value judgments can generate misinformation and distort reality rather than clarify it. Once we understand our profoundly unique, creative, but also challenging, burdensome condition as thinking and interpretive beings, we are faced with deciding how best to make sense out of what William James once described as this blooming, buzzing confusion of unfiltered human experience. There's all this information, but what do we do with it? What do we do with all of these facts? How do we make sense of them? Here, critical thinking directs us to think rationally. Thinking rationally, of course, by itself can just become another buzzword without any clear meaning, other than it means think like I do, which is very often how it's used, which is also the case with critical thinking. You're not a critical thinker because you don't share my opinions. Thinking rationally means, first of all, taking responsibility to justify yourself, explaining how or why you came to a particular conclusion, on what grounds. It's unfortunate that in a society so focused on the notion of self-reliance, we forget that Unitarian Ralph Waldo Emerson, what he meant by the concept when he wrote an essay by the title of Self-Reliance in 1841, because what he meant was not economic self-reliance. He was talking about intellectual self-reliance. He said, "Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your mind. Absolve you to yourself, and you shall have the suffrage of the world. I am ashamed to think how easily we capitulate to badges and names, to large societies and dead institutions," end quote. As I said, Emerson wasn't focused on economic self-reliance. He was focused on intellectual self-reliance. Do we do our own thinking? Do we stand on our own intellectual feet? Or do we defer to common sense, to popular opinion, or those who stand above us insisting that we defer to their title instead of to the prominence or the clarity of their argument? More than just explaining how or why, rational thinking further requires us to explain why the reasons we give are actually good or actually worth relying on for this conclusion we've developed. The fact that we were raised to believe something, or that the belief is widely held, or even endorsed by those in positions of power, or of a particular social group, fails the test of rational thinking. Not just any reason will do for critical thinking. We are looking for logical rather than causal explanations. We want more than a compelling story, as important as those might be. We want to touch the truth beneath the surface, beneath the surface of what is so often treated and taken as reality itself. Fromm, again, proves very helpful here when he demystifies the larger purpose of human reason, this unique human capacity. In his book, Man for Himself, he says that the function of reason is, and I quote, to know, to understand, to grasp, to relate oneself to things by comprehending them. It penetrates through the surface of things in order to discover their essence, their hidden relations, and their deeper meanings, their reason, end quote. In other words, reason is interested in knowledge, not just true belief, as the philosophers will tell us is insufficient, but justified true belief, a belief that is true that we have a relationship to, such that we can articulate it, that we understand it. Speaking concretely, to think critically is to think in a coherent or consistent manner. Our statements of belief should be, at least, at a bare minimum, logically possible, which is to say that they should at least be imaginably true. And this seems like a really low standard that like nobody is going to be able to miss. And the sad thing is that everybody in this room, before the day is over, will likely violate this basic thought law. When our statements of belief entail a logical contradiction, they're logically impossible. They are, by definition, false. Despite claims to the contrary, some things are actually impossible. It's logically impossible that I'm in Florida with you right now, but I'm also in Texas. And don't give me this about like somebody else is my twin brother, it's a hologram. I'm talking about me. I'm here right now and I'm not in Texas. I can't be in both places at the same time. It's impossible for LeBron James to be better or worse than himself in basketball. For Bill Blatsky, whoever the heck that is, to have been killed by Eric Reed, whoever the heck that is, even though Eric Reed doesn't exist. Those are just impossibilities. For you to live in a democracy wherein the public exercises no decision-making power and choosing elected leaders. Each of these are literal absurdities, not the absurdities that we typically speak about, which basically amount to people who don't agree with us. That's absurd because I don't agree with your conclusion. They violate the basic law of non-contradiction, something we can at least all theoretically get behind, whatever our political ideological persuasion is. The principle that dictating that contradictory statements, you're up but you're down, you're in but you're out, you're perfect but you're flawed, it's entirely delicious but it's also just a little bit terrible, are necessarily false. They're literally irrational or illogical statements. They're absurd. Now the point here is that our beliefs carry the weight of logical implications that must be accounted for as we think and communicate. It's easy to speak over here in this one way and to ignore that thought when it's inconvenient when we're having this conversation over here. It's very complicated if we're interested in what Emerson highlights, which is integrity, which is something that all of us can only strive for but will never quite perfectly achieve. If existence is necessary for doing anything in the world, then the moment we know that Eric Reed has never existed, we immediately know that he's never killed anyone. And since democracy is an idea that means that the right of the public to exercise decision-making power and choosing their elected leaders, to speak of a society where the public doesn't have those fundamental rights, is not to speak of a flawed democracy, it's not to speak of a democracy at all. To think critically, we must acknowledge and resolve contradictions. It's true that the dog fighting, for example, is morally repugnant, but why? Not just because society says so, not just because you got a dog, but because it requires an incomparable sacrifice from a sensitive, thinking, feeling being subjected to gruesome violence only to entertain human beings. Then it's also going to be true that slaughtering pigs for food is also morally repugnant, since it requires an incomparable sacrifice from sensitive, thinking beings subjected to gruesome violence to satiate taste buds, but not the nutritional needs of human beings, given its link to, heart disease, which is the #1 killer in our country. If it's true that Russians leaders responsible for illegally invading Ukraine ought to be morally condemned, as I certainly think they ought to, for the 10,000 Ukrainian civilians who've died as a result of Russian munitions since the start of that war in February 2022, and we know it continues, then it's also true that the American leaders responsible for illegally invading Iraq in March 2003 ought to be morally condemned. For the 25,000 Iraqi civilians killed between March 2003 and March 2005, 9,000 of which are believed to have been directly the result of U.S. forces and U.S. munitions. Despite this being the 20th anniversary of that bloody, inane, illegal war, you will find hardly a mention of the fact that 6,616 Iraqi civilians were killed by U.S. munitions in the first 21 days of that war. Hardly a peep. And if we believe that it is morally repugnant for a government or a political organization to kill civilians in order to achieve their objective, then we will condemn the killing of each and every precious Israeli, no more and no less than each and every Palestinian, if our commitment is to human dignity and the preservation of innocent life. And the point is not to shame or to silence one another upon locating a logical contradiction, but rather to highlight them so that we may thoughtfully and in dialogue and honestly resolve them in a fair-minded, principled manner, striving for integrity. Some will insist that we must distinguish between those who incidentally kill civilians by bombing urban communities and those who kill them through direct targeting. Others will reply that the intent is less important than the consequences, which are the same, the killing of innocents. And still others will argue that failing to adequately consider the predictable lethal consequences for civilians being bombed in urban areas against the warnings of human rights organizations and the United Nations constitutes a repugnant moral indifference that fails to honor human dignity. In contrast to the celebration of one-liner witticisms and the acerbic social media mic drops that we experience in our ordinary public discourse, critical thinking invites us to not drop the mic, but to pass the mic. Pass the mic of critique so that we can foster genuine dialogue. By conveying the underlying reason that supports our conclusions, we offer others a window into something much deeper and more illuminating than a mere opinion. We help them understand us, understand the basis of our thinking. If we relinquish the narrow goal of egoistic victory, which too often is the motivating factor in our so-called conversations, a reasonable and respectful dialogue may foster insight for each participant, may humanize each participant, and may reveal gaps and inconsistencies in each participant, just as it might potentially reveal some compelling justifications that illuminate the other side. Critical thinking's demand for reasonable thinking is a demand for principled thinking. And principled thinking is important to us because only by consistently aligning our beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and experiences with our foremost commitments and our values can we lay claim to hold, can we achieve that coveted integrity that makes a good life possible. The pursuit of integrity through confronting contradictions requires more than skillful deployment of reasoning, as I mentioned before. Resolving our intellectual and our moral inconsistencies, they're easy to locate in others. You've done that already. You've got a long catalog about others, those who don't have your political persuasion, those with whom you do not ethnically, socially identify with. But the challenge for us as critical thinkers is to identify our inconsistencies. And we can immediately tell those who are the least developed critical thinkers because they are the first to lay claim to having no inconsistencies. And then there we know we're in big trouble. Resolving these inconsistencies, our lack of integrity, requires character. Specifically, it requires courage. Reason without courage is a wasted skill. The contemporary philosopher Cornel West poetically paraphrased William Butler Yeats as having written, "It takes more courage for a person to search the dark corners of their soul than it does for a soldier to fight on the battlefield." Courage to think critically. Courage is the enabling virtue of any person, end quote. And here West echoes the wisdom offered by the existentialist psychologist Rollo May, who wrote that life itself calls for us to, quote, confront a no man's land, to push into a forest where there are no well-worn paths and from which no one has returned to guide us, end quote. He said that we're called to live into the future, which means leaping into the unknown. And this requires a degree of courage for which there is no immediate precedent and which few people realize. May contends that courage is the foundation that underlies and gives reality to all other virtues and personal values, end quote. To think critically is not just to have the command of reason, logic, and the facts. To think critically is to courageously encounter questions and answers that may justifiably frighten us precisely because the answers may leave us unchanged. Excuse me, they may leave us changed. Courageous thinking, for example, refuses to embrace dishonest conclusions simply because they're socially safer. Rather, the aim is, as the English philosopher John Stuart Mill pointed, to follow good faith reasoning wherever it leads us. To think critically is to try and recognize those reoccurring errors of reasoning that we call fallacies. And a fallacy is more than just an erroneous inference, an erroneous line of questioning or argument. It's a way of thinking that, as one of my mentors, philosopher Elliot Cohen, put it, has a proven track record of frustrating our personal and interpersonal happiness. We too often think about critical thinking, it's talked about as a job skill. It's actually a fundamental human capacity that has to be activated for us to live lives of meaning. And I think it's useful to mention, and I'll close by highlighting that the list of fallacies is really long. I mean, what's interesting is the more you learn about critical thinking, and specifically the more you learn the catalogs of fallacies that have been put together over, human experience, the more you realize that it's so much easier to be wrong than it is to be right. And instead of presuming that you're right most of the time, I don't know, at least from my perspective, I'm really excited to discover that I might have gotten it right, instead of being really disappointed that I got it wrong. I'll just mention a few of the categories of fallacies that undermine our good thinking. Some of our fallacies pertain to facts, which we focus a lot on. Just somebody's got the facts wrong. Others involve errors of reasoning, logical fallacies. Some fallacies pertain to our misuse of language, the way that we use words. Fallacies of meaning, such as when we use vague terms or we switch the meanings of the terms that we're using in the middle of an argument. Really confuses things. Maybe think about fallacies, we're also convinced maybe somebody's giving us a really good argument because we're bewildered, but it turns out our bewilderment is because they've actually made an error in their reasoning. It's difficult to catch, though. And sometimes we have the facts right, but at the expense of the relevance. So we get fallacies of relevance. And yet another category, as I've alluded to earlier, has to do with fallacious thinking and value judgments, a failure to recognize that many of our disagreements have nothing to do with the facts, but the meaning that we give to them. So suffice it to say, critical thinking is vital to a good life. But without that courage to critically examine not only those that we view as political opponents, not only those who hold different ethical dispositions, but a failure to be able to critically interrogate our beliefs and recognize those contradictions prevents us from growth, and it also prevents the vital dialogue that clearly we need during these trying times. Thank you.
We're going to wait and have questions after service. Jeffrey is going to hang around for a while, so please feel free to pepper him and continue the conversation. There was a lot there, and I agree that it's crucial to practice our critical thinking. I, for one, always think I'm wrong and don't know enough. So I love the fact of thinking like that. So let's extinguish this flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And we'll join our closing music this morning. Think. Ooh, Aretha Franklin. And here comes Michelle. All right.
And lovely backup singers. And Larry on the guitar. You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Think, let your mind go, let yourself be free. Let's go back, let's go back, let's go way on back. I didn't even know you. You've been I ain't no psychiatrist, I ain't no doctor with disease. But it don't take too much hot to see what you're doing to me. Yeah, you better think. Think about what you're trying to do to me. Yeah, think. Let your mind go, let yourself be free. Oh, freedom, 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 oh, freedom, 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 hey, think about it. Oh, think about it. Ain't nothing you could have got to help me, but I won't. But I was gonna try, but I'm not. If you keep doing this, I won't. You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Oh, think. Let your mind go, let yourself be free. People walking around every day, playing games and taking the scores. Trying to make other people lose their mind. Be careful you don't lose yours. Oh, think about what you're trying to do to me. Oh, think now let yourself be free. You need me, I need you. Without each other, there ain't nothing we can do. Oh, think about it, baby. Yeah, think about it, baby. Think about forgiveness. Think about it, baby. Think about forgiveness. Think about it, baby.
Let's give them another round of applause. Larry, Michelle, Sarah, Lindsay, Paul, just thank you. I'm so amazed at the wealth of musical knowledge that just comes out in services. It's just so much fun. Thank you. So closing words today, I found 40 of the best quotes about critical thinking. First from Desmond Tutu. My father used to say, don't raise your voice, improve your argument, which critical thinking is not necessarily to argue, but it is good for conversation. And one of my favorite authors, A.A. Milne, who created Winnie the Pooh, one of my favorite characters. The third-rate mind is only happy when it is thinking with the majority. A second-rate mind is only happy when it is thinking with the minority. A first-rate mind is only happy when it is thinking. So let's all use our first-rate minds this week and remember how important that is. So, time for coffee, conversation, check in with Jeff. I hope you guys love having him here as much as I do. He's got a lot to say. You're free to go. Or stay. Or whatever.